there's more entrepreneurship in Mexico than Europe, probably more even than in Canada. Because what I found in Mexico, and this is what I've told the story many times, is I became very impressed when I went to Mexico City the first time. Okay. So when you go to Mexico and you stop at a red light and you see people juggling fire, try to get pesos, that's entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And we don't have that in Canada. And even in Europe, when I spoke in Sweden or Germany, they're so used to the government and just having a safe, secure job. So in many ways, I feel there's more entrepreneurs here. But I also feel that Mexicans, Latin Americans, this is my heart speaking, is they need to realize they're worth more.
Okay.
You know, you work so hard. You know, I see so many people work so hard in Mexico and yet paid so little. Kind of a shame. So I'm trying to help change that to have a higher standard of living for people.
Bienvenidos a Dimes y Billetes, un podcast de finanzas para nosotros los otros. Yo soy Moris Dieck y juntos aprenderemos de dinero, inversiones y economía. Todo sencillito, con peras y manzanas. Prepárate, que este es el primer día de tu nueva vida financiera. 3, 2, 1. Comenzamos. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Dimes y Billetes podcast. People, this podcast is clearly on English. You can tune on YouTube to watch it with subtitles. And we're here with Darren Weeks. It's a pleasure to have you here, Darren, investor. How are you doing? Welcome to Mexico. You've been around Mexico.
I've been around Mexico probably for 10 years teaching financial education. And then as a Canadian, obviously many, many winters here. I came for probably 20 different Christmas times in Mexico. So yeah, I'm a big fan. And that's why I moved to Cabo San Lucas 5 years ago, full time.
That's great. Born and raised in Canada.
Yeah, born and raised Edmonton, Alberta. And people say, why? I say, well, you know, it's energy. We have a lot of oil and gas there, so it was very affluent. But like most people, when you retire, you want to go somewhere warmer. So I did that 5 years ago.
That's great. You've been all around Mexico, right? You've been.
Yeah, I try to see more and more all the time. You know, because I'm a resident now, I want to make sure that I'm familiar with the states and the cities. So I'm trying to travel as much as possible to see, you know, the different cultures and the foods. And so far, it's just wonderful.
Okay, that's great. Let's begin with your first impressions on. You've been talking about financial education, and it's different to talking about Canada, the U.S., for example. I've lived in the U.S., and in the U.S., it's impressive how financial, and I haven't been to Canada, but I could imagine it's somehow similar, that financial education is something you get on the cereal. I mean, you get to work anywhere, and okay, here's your contract, here's your stock options, and the financial culture is a little bit more fluent, and it's normal, I could say. But what's your impressions here when you come to Mexico, a Latin country? I don't know if you've been in other places in Latin America. Like, what are your first impressions on this matter?
Well, I've actually spoken all over the world, and I would say there's more entrepreneurship in Mexico than Europe, probably more even than in Canada. Because what I found in Mexico, and this is what I've told the story many times, is I became very impressed when I went to Mexico City the first time. You know,
how long ago was that?
About 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Now, you know, I'd gone to the Cancuns of the world and the beaches, but not teaching financial education. Okay. So when you go to Mexico and you stop at a red light and you see people juggling fire, try to get pesos, that's entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And we don't have that in Canada. And even in Europe, when I spoke in Sweden or Germany, they're so used to the government and just having a safe, secure job. So in many ways, I feel there's more entrepreneurs here. But I also feel that Mexicans, Latin Americans, this is my heart speaking, is they need to realize they're worth more.
Okay.
You know, you work so hard. You know, I see so many people work so hard in Mexico and yet paid so little. Kind of a shame. So I'm trying to help change that to have a higher standard of living for people.
Let's dig in a little bit more on the first thing you said. People in Mexico is more entrepreneurial. People on the streets juggling fire. Why do you think is this? Like, what are the incentives behind this?
Food.
Necessity.
Yeah, in Canada, you don't have to do that. Like, I mean, it sounds crazy, but my son was working for my coffee company. He was going through high school, so he still lived in Canada. And he made $5,000 part-time in grade 11. And when COVID kicked in, $5,000 was the threshold. So let's say he made $5,100. The Canadian government gave him like $12,000 as a 17-year-old. So there's so much socialism in Canada now and more in Europe and more in the States that we're teaching our young kids, I think, bad lessons. Whereas in Mexico, I don't think there was any handouts during COVID. You know, so that's, I think, the difference is you want to eat. Sounds rough, but the socialism in Canada, I think, is just bringing a terrible problem for the young generation.
And when you said that people in Mexico has to value themselves more, and I think this is related to the quote, "Don't work much, work intelligently." Like, and I think that happens a lot here in Mexico, because when you analyze the productivity indicators in the country, they're pretty low. And when you also compare it with the level or percentage of informality, you're talking about 1 in each 2 businesses are informal business. So what's your take on this?
Well, my take is if we have more education, people that have, for instance, low-skilled opportunities or jobs would start to realize with some different skills or some different mindsets, they can offer more to their employer and then ask for more. I'm not saying you're going to walk in day one and say, I want a raise, I want to own half the company. But if you start to put the hat on of the entrepreneur, let's say it's you're hiring people and I'm a worker and I make your life easier, it's easier to ask for a raise. Or eventually maybe you ask, I'm not saying, 1 year, let's say we have a restaurant. Okay? Restaurants are difficult. And I'm a really good worker. I show up on time. You as a restaurant owner realize the headaches. You're going to value me a lot.
Yeah.
But you still have to perform. So I would suggest to people that, you're already working hard. Just work that little extra harder mentally and realize what's going to make my boss happier with me. What's going to make his life easier. And if you can do that, I think you've got a lot more negotiating power.
Well, I'm gonna try to pick your brain. And how do you see all this in the context of AI and modern technology? Let me tell you something. I'm a true believer. Things are gonna get really, really strange in the following years. And many people talk about wealth gap, also a gender gap, which they currently exist. But what about the digital gap, which already exists right now, but it could get even worse in the future, especially on low productivity jobs? How do you think this is going to transform financial wealth of individuals in the short run?
I agree. It's a huge challenge, and especially to a country like Mexico. For instance, 5 years ago, I heard they've got robots that can pick strawberries 24 hours a day, even in the dark, when they're perfectly ready to be picked, right? So that's going to obviously impact a lot of jobs. Yeah. So I would say this, there's always going to be an economy, no matter what. There's always an economy. And what I see, this is my opinion, and COVID proved it, if you have a skill set that realizes there's always an economy, you're going to be on top all the time. But if you think, oh no, poor me, I'm going to lose my job because of AI, then you're going to lose your job because of AI. So what I suggest for entrepreneurs is the best investment is to invest in different skills. Okay? And I would have to admit, I'm not very good with technology and things you're probably talking about AI, probably haven't studied. But just you got to sharpen your skills so you're well-rounded because things have changed. But there's always an economy. There's always going to be rich people and poor people.
Can you tell us a little bit more about these skills you're talking about?
There's so many. One time I did an event in Canada. We had groups of 10. And I said to them, they did a little project, what's the most important skills to be an entrepreneur? And it was interesting because, every group gave you different ones in different orders, but generally the same. So this. I mean, you have to be able to talk to people.
Yeah, of course.
Simple. If you want to have a business, you have to know how to sell. Okay? I took accounting in school. I didn't know how to sell.
You're a undergraduate on accounting.
Yeah, it was business degree. We didn't really have minors and majors, but I wanted to take accounting courses because back when I graduated, there was no jobs unless you're an accountant. Okay. So I took it because I didn't want to be unemployed. I hated it.
Interesting.
But I did take accounting. So in university, they don't teach you how to sell. There's so many different skill sets. Nowadays, obviously, and I'm not good at this, you are social media. You have to be an expert in finance. You have to be an expert, at least know a lot about different things. So there's so many skills you have to work on. And it's always changing. Like you just said, with AI, there's going to be new skills you're going to have to realize you need to learn. And I've said this many years, when there's a COVID situation or a recession or a government changes the rules, nobody can take all your skills. And then, I look at me, I moved to Mexico 5 years ago. Unfortunately, I don't speak much Spanish. But after 2 months sitting in Cabo San Lucas on the beach, I said, okay, I can't do this anymore. I'm bored. So then I started a company. So when you're an entrepreneur, you have skills, you can travel anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
You know? Whereas if you're a doctor, you have to have a medical degree. You can't travel anywhere. You have to stay in that country. But as an entrepreneur with skills, you open arms almost everywhere in the world because governments want you to come and create jobs.
Yeah. Darren, what you're saying is we continuously have to be learning. And also, I think the most important word here, it's adapting.
Sure.
But adapting to new situations require, first of all, push. Like, I don't know how to say it in English, but like drive.
Drive. Yeah.
You need drive. Drive is not something you find normally on people. Why not? Because you have to push yourself out of the comfort zone. And that's a concept that everyone is familiar with. But what would you recommend for people? Like, everything's changing so fast right now. And when you think you're above everything, rules change. And this is probably months away, like not even years, like months. And people look constantly for comfort. What would you say to them and how to start this? I'm going to say it's a habit of constantly learning and adapting.
Everybody's different, and you can't teach drive. You know, if you could do that, you'd have the most successful seminar company in the world. One time, my mentor, Robert Kiyosaki, I'll never forget this. We were in Toronto speaking, and he said the 3 most important Ds: drive, determination, and discipline. I would also suggest for people listening, I think you have to have some curiosity. Since I was a little boy, I was always very curious about money, but I really didn't have anybody guide me until I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. You know, I just did things out of just I want to be rich.
Yeah.
But when he finally started to give me some guidance, I became very curious, and then the drive just was automatic. My drive was small before I read his book and met him, and then it became greater. But if you don't have the drive, you're not listening to this anyway.
Yeah,
right.
That's the first step.
Right. And I would also suggest that for you that are listening, that makes this even more wonderful, because if you want more money in your life, for instance, and that is a different term for everybody, it's actually not that hard, because most people are not going to compete with you because they don't have the drive. So you're really only competing with maybe 10% of the population, because most people are just comfortable. They're happy.
Yeah.
So it's really not that hard. Be curious, have some mentorship, continue to educate yourself. And of course, you have to take action.
Take action. That's one of the things that people have more difficult with. And let's go back to your perspective of the Latin American people. I have interviewed Europeans, actually very recently, a Japanese guy. And it's very interesting, their take on Latin American people financial decisions. Because we're clearly, we're all humans. But I mean, our sense of, I don't know, even belonging and social skills and what we look forward in our life, it's I'm going to say this word, I hope people doesn't get it wrong, but we're kind of built different. And that happens a lot with different type of civilizations or communities around the world. What's your take on Latin American people and financial decisions?
I honestly don't think it's any different anywhere I've traveled to. I think it's the same everywhere. Everywhere I've spoken to, Poland, England, Argentina, Paraguay, everywhere I've spoken to, it's the same percentage of people. Some have drive and some don't. There's different levels of standards of livings throughout the world. And like I said earlier, Europe to me is a little bit softer because of socialism. But to me, there's opportunities everywhere. There's lazy people everywhere. Everywhere there's people with drive. Everywhere is the same percentages, I think. That's just my example.
But digging it more on emotions, like even how people perceive money, how they view it, how they I've learned this actually when, for example, when you talk with couples on financial matters, and for example, a couple in the U.S., like it's very straightforward, or even jobs, like here comes the boss and say, okay, this is the decision. If you're not doing things correctly. Like, I'll correct you or not, you're fired, and that's it. And everyone understands because it's a transaction, and that's the work culture, and it works for them, and that's great. But if you apply the same things on a Mexican company, you could get really in trouble because I don't know, because we Mexicans, like, we feel, I don't know, we're a little bit more warm. I don't know if it's the correct word, but I've seen the difference in couples. I've seen the difference in companies and in the way that they, and even on some financial decisions and the energy that people thinks it comes with it. Have you seen something of this?
I would ask this, and I would ask you this in a polite way.
Okay.
Have you owned any companies in the United States with employees?
Own a company in the United States? No.
In Canada?
No.
In Europe?
No.
So I have, and it's better in Mexico.
It's better in Mexico.
Better.
Why?
So many reasons. The one thing is the cost of labor. Like, my lowest paid secretary in Canada is $50,000. That's the lowest to get them to show up to work. So right away, you've got the gap in wages. My company in Mexico, I don't make people work 6 days a week. So I moved here. I didn't know that was the culture. So now I see people making their employees work 6 days a week. I'm like, holy damn, that's crazy. But people work 6 days a week.
Yeah.
They work double the hours that the Canadians work. So you get so much more productivity. The accountants are very well educated. My team's in Cancun. It's a tenth of the price, I hope they don't hear this, than my Canadian accountants. Legal, everything's cheaper here. And you've got very smart people that work longer hours, work harder. And I think there's more competition for the jobs. Now, economies also go up and down.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, when I graduated many years ago, there were no jobs. So, the economy was different. So maybe there's more competition. But in Mexico right now, there's a lot of competition for, if you pay your people a little bit more, there's a ton of competition. Whereas, as most people know, in Canada, US, you can't find enough workers.
Yeah.
So I've been the biggest Mexico booster since I moved here because I've got experience with employees in these different countries. I'm starting to see it's pretty good here. It really is. I would say the worst part about moving here as an entrepreneur is the banking system. The slowness of it.
Okay.
Yeah, very, very slow.
Or like to open an account and to get
exactly. Online banking, things like that. It's probably one of the biggest weaknesses, but otherwise I think mostly it's positives.
That's great.
Yeah.
What are the most important, like, financial lessons? Let's imagine someone is listening right now and it wants to get ahead on their finance, but they're not anywhere. Like, they're going to make the first step. What would you think the first step would be?
Well, again, I would say it's to have some curiosity and, open up your mind to learning something, because we don't teach our kids in school, whether it's in Canada or Mexico or US, about financial education. And these days with the internet, there's so many resources that are free. Of course, for me, the book is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That changed my life back in 2001. So, read that
2001
book.
was the first year you read the book.
Yeah. I always, since 20 years before that, I wanted to, be rich. So I already owned condos and businesses.
You wanted to be rich. Let's dig in that. What does rich mean for you?
Well, at the time I was 6, so I didn't know. But my uncle, he gave me 3 quarters for helping to move some boxes from one apartment to another. And that was it. I was hooked. I wanted to have more money. And to me, the quick answer was I wanted to have my own car when I was 16. That was my goal when I was 6.
That's what rich meant for you at 6.
Yeah.
Having your own car.
Yeah.
And what you saw was the stepping stone in order to get there.
Well, at that time, it was just purely working hard, right? I lifted boxes. I got paid 3 quarters. So then I started to, in Canada, you shovel sidewalks with the snow. Or back then, there was something called the newspaper, deliver newspapers and flyers. Then I used to referee ice hockey, so to make money, right? So everything was transactional.
Yeah.
I didn't understand leverage. I was young. Yeah.
And when you get the car, say, does your definition of richness changed?
Yeah, because the car was, 90% of the money that I earned for those 10 years. The car was a 1976 Buick Skyhawk. It was $500. And the paint job was $600. So I remember that because it was my own money.
Yeah.
So I realized at that time, wow, I'm pretty much broke now. I bought a car. But it also opened up my mind because now I could travel to make more money.
Okay.
So because I was good at skating, instead of working at McDonald's for $3 an hour, I could teach skating for $20 an hour. But I couldn't teach skating with a car. So it gave me some leverage to actually travel to make more money.
Okay.
jobs.
And why do you study accounting?
Again, I wanted to get in. I wasn't very good at school, so I had to go back to grade 12 for next year to get into college.
Yeah.
Then I have to go back to college for next year to get into
in
university.
Canada, right?
Yeah, all in Edmonton. I watched a program, and it was a Japanese program when I was probably 13, and it hit me. Like very few things have hit me. And the gist of it was rich people own real estate and business. So if I want to be rich, I have to own a business. So everybody in my life told me if you want to be rich, you have to go to school. I'm sure you've heard that. So, okay, if you have to go to school, what should I take? Well, I want to take business. That's the only reason I got into it. But unfortunately, like I said, the economy was so bad, even with the degree, you couldn't get a job. So maybe if you had an accounting degree, you'd have more likelihood to get a job. So that's the only reason I took it.
Yeah. And okay, you said real estate and business. So how did your career started on this matter?
Well, in university, I was going to be married to my high school sweetheart. We met when we were 15. And when you get married, you obviously leave your parents' house. And I didn't want to rent because rich people own real estate. So I was damned and determined not to rent. And I was only in my third year university, but I found a way I could buy a house with no money. It was just, you had to be creative, right?
Yeah.
So I found a way. So I bought my first property, my third and a half year of university.
Your first property at university?
Yeah. Yeah, I owned it for 30 years before I sold it.
Oh, interesting.
And then on a business side, I invested in the stock market when I was 10 years old in the energy sector. And after about a year, I sold it. But I remembered, and I'm from Alberta, which is oil, capital of Canada. When Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, I took all my student loan money and put it into the oil sector.
Put it in the oil sector.
That was sort of my, investing in business and the stock market and doubled my money in a few months. So I've always been interested. But the funny thing was, you go back to school, and I'll never forget this. You go back to the accounting class, sit in the back row. It was a small room of maybe 40 students. And I would show them what I just bought on the weekend, my first property. Nobody was interested. I was so shocked. I thought, we're in business school. Yeah. Nobody seemed to care. They just wanted to focus on the teacher.
On the corporate ladder.
Yeah, get a job.
Yeah.
Wasn't ever my thing.
What's your take on the real estate sector here in Mexico? I mean, what we have here, the thing with interest rates, especially, to tell someone to have a real estate property while college, I could say less than 1% here in Mexico. What would you recommend for people interested in entering the real estate market?
Well, you have to study, first of all. So when people say, is real estate good or bad in Mexico or Canada, I would say, well, hold on a second. There's always good deals in every economy, and there's always bad deals. But even within Mexico, and I've bought properties in many different areas. I can't remember some of the names even, but I've probably owned properties in 5 or 6 different areas. And I just study the same fundamentals. And I've done this for 30 years. So right now I'm developing a project in Cancun.
Oh, great.
I just bought property in Querétaro not too long ago, but I study the fundamentals in migration, demographics, unemployment rates, wage increases, things like that. And if you do that, I think you can, with a high degree of certainty, pick the proper markets. In 1990, I didn't know that. I just bought a property because I had to live somewhere, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know that for years. But now, one of my favorite things is to study the fundamentals of real estate.
That's
properties
great.
all over the world.
And this project, it's of your own development.
I'm more of the finance, but I do own some of it. My partner's Raul Martinez. He's developing it.
He's developing. Great. And for someone who wants to enter the real estate market, I mean, and it's going to be kind of tough, but who doesn't own any capital. Like he's starting and he's listening to us right now. And he said, okay, I have a 9 to 5 and he wants to push out and start in the sector because he has heard of the sector is interesting. What would you recommend? What are the first steps?
Read my book.
Okay. Was it the name of the book? You can tell it?
It's not even available. I think you have to come to our events to get it. It's called The Art of Raising Capital.
The Art of Raising Capital. That's great.
So everybody who's going to buy properties is going to run out of money eventually. Everybody. So when I owned 12 properties, I had no more money. I didn't know how to get any more properties. I couldn't buy any more for no money. They changed the rules. So what I started to do was to sharpen up my skills because I realized you have to leverage people, time, and money. So what I would do is I would convince other people Remember, I was an accountant, so my sales skills were terrible. But my first business failure taught me how to sell better. I would convince people to give me their money, and in return, I would find them fantastic properties that would make money the first day we bought them together.
Okay.
So another thing, if you have no money...
like a search fund, kind of.
A which?
Like a search fund. Like you give me money, I'll search for it.
It was more partnerships. Yeah, it was like partnerships.
Okay.
And as you get better, you can ask for more and more. But at first, if you gave me the money, I would only take 10% of the deal.
Yeah.
But eventually, if I got really good, I would start taking 50% of the deal with no money. So again, I had to realize, okay, who has money? And people say doctors. Okay, well, how do you see doctors? You can't. They're always busy. So I crossed that off the list. And eventually, I found teachers in Canada to make okay money, but you have lots of access to them at conventions. So I would go to conventions, meet people.
Doctors' conventions.
Teachers first.
Teachers' conventions.
Teachers, because they were easy to get in front of and you could speak to large groups.
Yeah.
And eventually I would just convince people to invest with me their money, but I would put all my time and effort and my team's time and effort into the deal. I would make sure they always got their paid back first. Okay, so you're offering somebody with money an opportunity to get into real estate where they really can't lose. If there's no profit, I don't make any money. Whereas the banks, most of the investments, they make money even if they lose your portfolio parts of it. So, long story short, even if you have no money, it's not a big deal. You have to learn the skills to communicate, to dress for success. I showed up with an old Mercedes instead of my newer Dodge Shadow I bought as a student because it's the brand. So there's lots of little things you need to work on to convince other people to say, hey, that makes a lot of sense. You're professional. I trust you. You don't pressure me. And before long, you could own lots of properties with no money.
Yeah.
Does it make sense?
Yeah.
I'm going quick here, but...
No, it's great. What are some of the areas here in Mexico you've seen that are great opportunities for real estate investment?
We have a fund, and one of the partners we have is Infonavit.
Infonavit.
They're the second largest Infonavit in terms of volume. I invest my money personally with them before I ever moved to Mexico, so we have them as a customer. I look for, again, businesses that have experience that make good profit margins also have real estate as a collateral. That's kind of what I like to do. Say with the development in Cancun. I own the land, so it's my land. I make sure I get paid first.
Okay. And when you said also real estate, it's interesting, and also businesses. What type of businesses are you, do you like?
Businesses that own real estate in some capacity.
Okay.
So I want the collateral. So every investment you make is in some type of a business. So I want somebody like Infonavit's, again, second largest in terms of volume. Okay. I know the profit margins. They've got a good track record. I know the team. So that's the kind of business I want to invest in. But if they don't pay me, I own the houses.
You own the
I own the land, the houses. Make sense?
Yeah. But it's, just to understand a little bit more, it's like a financial business, right? So you loan to the Infonavit?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Well, not to the Infonavit, into the company that
who develops for the Infonavit.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you have the collateral, which is the real estate. Okay. And this works like a fund. Like you raise capital.
Yeah, I raise capital.
Yeah, you raise capital.
My background in Canada is, going back to the teacher conventions. Let me just go in steps.
Yeah.
So after teacher conventions for a year, I made a lot of mistakes. And what I learned in school was when I made a mistake, I felt really stupid. I was never a good student. I felt stupid every time, especially university, every time a test would come back. I really was ashamed because I knew, and they'd post the grades, I just felt dumb because I always did almost the worst in the class. So I was really happy to meet Robert Kiyosaki because he told me that you're going to make mistakes as an entrepreneur. And school, they make you feel, for me, it made me feel stupid. Whereas when I was raising capital, I didn't have a great deal of success with teachers, but I bought, say, 10 properties in a year. But I made a lot of mistakes. Then I went to the dentist conventions. And all of a sudden now, these guys have way more money. But guess what? For 1 year, I made mistakes with teachers, which I'll never make with the dentists.
Yeah.
And then I started to raise money in a big capacity. We bought 5,000 properties in the United States in 2008 to 12. So when everything crashed.
8 to 12. A great moment for buying, right?
Well, as a Canadian, our dollar was stronger than the US dollar when we bought. When I sold a few years ago, we made 30% more. Right? So those lessons, the teacher convention, the dentist convention, it just gave me so many lessons and experiences and mistakes that I could just go way, way bigger. So when I came to Mexico and retired for a month or two, I thought, okay, this is boring. So I started the same process in Mexico.
Darren, in this moment, 2008, blood's on the streets. Everyone has fear. But it's well known that this kind of situations bring the best opportunities. How did you defeat fear in these moments? Because a lot of people just get paralyzed. There's I think this is not the best moment. So, no, wait. When everything gets better, it's going to be safer. How to make a good decision during these times?
It was easy, but morally it was difficult. And I'll explain why the morally part was difficult. It was really easy, and I'm gonna pick on the banks a little bit. And it's more common in Canada, the United States, where people have extra money and they put their money into the RRSPs or the 401ks, the retirement funds.
Yeah.
And that's money they get taken off their paycheck, and there's some tax benefits. And most Canadians and Americans don't really look at that account too much. But when their portfolio was cut in half, and they would come to a seminar that I was putting on with my team, and we educated them. And we would basically show them their portfolio just went down in half, but the banks were still charging you fees, but they just lost half your money. The reason we became so big, so successful, so fast, I think, was education. Because once people realized that the deck was not in their favor ever, if they're in those types of investments, they wanted out. So the education was why we grew so much. The moral dilemma was, I couldn't look you in the eye, Moris, and say, you know what? You just lost 50% of your portfolio, put all that money into with me, because I think it's going to come back as well.
Yeah.
So that was the moral part, was I'm looking at their statements, realizing they lost half of their money. Do I really want them to take it all out and put it into U.S. real estate? So that was a challenge. But over time, it came back, but the seed was planted. Once people were educated on how Wall Street, Bay Street, the banks make their money, people flocked to our funds, flocked to them.
That's great. How many people are right now in the fund?
Well, it was 5,000 investors. They invested multiple times on average, but most of those have sold. Those are Canadian assets. So when I moved to Mexico, I wanted to get out of the business.
Great.
We still have a couple thousand investors.
What's your take on the economy right now? There's a lot saying the war in Ukraine, the recession or not recession in the U.S., high inflation, high interest rates. But then you look to Mexico and you learn about the nearshoring and all the opportunity happened right now. What's your take? Maybe we can go from the big picture and then we can come back to Mexico to know what's your take on all the situation, macroeconomically speaking.
Sure. I think it's really important, and I teach this, is you should have an idea of what's going on in the world, how oil prices and interest rates and prices of gold affect the economy. But at the end of the day, I come to Monterrey a couple of days ago, and I'm in San Pedro, and I look around, and I think, well, there's a lot of money in this world. Or as in Cancun, and Tulum's on fire, and I don't mean on fire, but booming, and Cabo's crazy. Or if I go to Scottsdale, it's going crazy. There's always an economy, But I think Mexico, and I've said this for years, because I also own part of a coffee company, and I have to buy my coffee bag from China. And I told, my database one time.
You buy the coffee from China, having the best coffee in Chiapas?
Just the bags. Just the bags, right? So I said at a Zoom to my customer base, said, can somebody hook me up with a coffee bag company? And people tried, but the prices were almost double of China.
Yeah.
So it's okay, how can you, how can you say, I'm going to change to Mexico when the price is that high? But I see with the China sentiment going down, things changing. And I also have said for years, we have a huge advantage in Mexico. You have free trade, and it's the same time zone as Canada, the United States, basically, compared to China. So I think that Mexico needs to sharpen up a little bit on certain things. And if you do that with the biggest economy in the world right next to us, it's going to be better than ever for Mexico.
You said you have to twitch a little some things. What things?
I would say probably the scale of some of the factories. That's why China is competing so well with everybody. They're so much bigger, So it's going to take some entrepreneurs and some capital to invest in, for instance, the machinery to make the coffee bags the same price as China. But let's say that's $100 million. That's a lot of money for an entrepreneur, right? So, it's a difficult situation. But for those that invest in that infrastructure, I think they'll do very, very well.
Great.
Yeah.
What are the main mistakes, financial mistakes you see Mexican people do?
Again, it's going to be the same as the Canadians, the Americans. Most people are lazy financially.
Lazy financially.
Yeah, most in all countries, not just Mexico. They're not disciplined, but again, it's not necessarily their fault. They don't teach it in school. Your parents weren't rich, so they didn't teach it to you. So I would say that really that it's two things, and I kind of suggest for people that have no money, take a year, but as I said earlier, those 3 Ds: drive, determination, and discipline. I don't care if it's 10 pesos a day, if that's what you can afford, if it's 5. Every single day, put that aside, okay? At the same time you're going to do that, you're going to see that, a little bit of money accumulate. And for those of you listening, you probably can guess I'm not a big fan of the banks, unless they lend me money. Right? Then I love them. But go open up a bank account and a separate bank account called your investment account. But you're not going to invest in it for a year, but you're going to save every single day, put that money in the bank once a month. But in the meantime, you're going to read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You're going to listen to every one of Moris's podcasts. You're going to go online and Google Robert Kiyosaki and watch all his videos and other gurus and just learn. And then what you need to do is look for different deals. And I think this is a benefit we have with my team is with the experience, every day somebody's phoning me with deals. And some people might think that's a burden. I love it. But for me to take your deal and replace the partners I've got now is going to be very, very, very difficult. But it's my challenge. Every day I want to do that, but it's hard because my guys are good. So in the meantime, I want you saving the money and getting educated. Go look at different deals. This is the sad story that almost everybody can relate to, either you or someone in your family. There was a lady who came to my wine and cheese event in Mexico City 3 months ago. And she was there. Kept nodding her head. She was agreeing with the things I was saying. And, it was an intimate event. I asked her why she came out and she brought her daughter. She goes, well, 25 years ago, I invested money and basically it was stolen. Basically, it was a ripoff. And she goes, ever since I haven't invested. And I said, let me tell you what you probably said. Okay, tell me. I said, you probably told all your friends and family, don't invest, it's risky. She smiles. She goes, yeah, that's what I told my daughter. That's what I told everybody. And I said, that's because you only looked at one deal. Right? And the guy probably had a nice suit on and the brochure was like really glossy and with no financial education, you gave him your money.
Yeah.
What if you would have looked at 10 deals, one a month for the first year? You'll start to get an idea of financial education by doing that. So then you've got some money set aside and now you can invest with a little more education and I would say less risk.
Yeah, people try to make the first decision the best decision and it gets complicated. Darren, you have been repeatedly said that you don't like banks. Why do you don't like banks?
When it comes to banks, we have to realize what they are. They're the most profitable industry in the world. They don't help the average person buy 1 or 2 rental properties. They definitely don't help the young entrepreneur. They're in a business. So if you're ever going to get any money from them, you're going to have to give them your house, a personal guarantee, and your firstborn. So I'm not a big fan of them because they don't help the small person. Also, when it comes to investments, most people, not all, they invest in mutual funds. They invest in savings. And I asked hundreds of thousands of people this question. Do you know anybody who all they did was go to school, got a job, save money, invest for the long run with the banks that are rich? I really don't know anybody that it works for. So why would you keep doing that? So just realize what the banks are. When I give them $5 million to buy a $20 million apartment building, I love them. Give me mortgages. But for the average person to think I'm going to save money, invest in mutual funds for the long run, ETFs, this is not going to work. The banks are making so much money off of the lack of financial education, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, it's they create a lot of profit, like you said, of the lack of education people have. It's impressive the amount of money people have in not even a savings account, like a current account. Like it's just there. Well, all like just there for the bank to make money and give you nothing back. It's interesting. You've mentioned something very interesting, and it's fraud. And I've seen in the last 3 years, since the pandemic began, a rise of, let's say, false funds, crypto scams, and a lot of shady things out there that use words and concepts like very different. Oh, you're gonna invest in financial markets, and you're gonna you have heard it. What's your take on all this, and why it's on the rise in the last years?
It's sad.
It's sad.
I think the reason it's on the rise is crypto. You had Bitcoin, and then you've had, hundreds and hundreds of scams. And I'm not a big fan of Bitcoin. I don't believe in it, any cryptocurrencies. If you do invest in it, make sure it's because you're already out of the rat race. Okay? You don't need any more money. Then you have extra money. Do whatever you want with it.
Yeah.
But I think crypto is one of the main reasons. And also the returns that they're promising and giving, it's really tempting because they pay you for a few months, a few quarters even. And you get hooked on it, you tell your friends. But I tell people, it's not possible. This is a true story. Somebody came to an event a few months ago, and they came in the morning, telling me about this cryptocurrency they're involved in. And then they brought the founder out that night, and we went for dinner after. And I called him out right in front of him. He started the business last September, and he came out in February, and they're paying 6% per month.
6%
per month.
monthly.
And I said right away, that's an impossibility. Like, how many businesses can make money first year?
Yeah.
Never mind make 6% per month. I called him out. I said, this is, I hate to be
Red
rude.
alert.
Here it's a scam. It's an impossibility.
Yeah.
Norway has the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world. They don't make 10% a year. And they can hire the smartest people in the world. And you're going to make 6% per month? Like, it's just no financial education. But people get the returns for a few months. It's a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
Nothing being produced. So, it's unfortunate. There's just so many scams and people just are not educated, so they fall for it. Then they'll lose their money and tell their family and friends, don't invest, it's risky.
Yeah. And I, while speaking with some of these people, you know what takes me very interesting in this type of situations is that people even doesn't understand a percentage. Like you just said it, 6% monthly. That's the first red flag.
Huge.
But people doesn't understand it. Like, but that's very fundamentally of investor knowledge. Like, okay, the first reference you gotta take it. It's the risk-free rate. So, but how to make people learn this stuff? Because you've said it in college. No way. No way. And let's be honest. There is some technicalities in this knowledge. We just said it.
Sure.
You have to be able to manage percentage.
Sure.
How many percentage of people do you think manage percentage rates correctly?
Not many.
Not many.
Plus, okay, now here's the sad part about the Mexico banking system. Compared to Canada, up until recently, you could get loans for 3, 4, 5%.
Yeah.
Okay. Interest rates against credit. Okay, car loans would be 8%. Credit card debt maybe 20%.
Car loans 8%
in Canada.
Oh
or less.
My God!
But what is it in Mexico?
Free money. No.
Right?
Car.
Right.
Yeah.
And now, what is a credit card debt in Mexico? I've heard 60%.
60% and the good ones.
Okay, so then when you say 6% per month, well, that's what the banks charge.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, okay, that makes some sense.
Darren, I've seen microcredits with interest rates of 3,000. Criminal.
Well, then it's not going to be paid back. But again, what they're hoping is the odd person pays to offset
course.
the ones that lose. It's criminal.
And the amount of this microcredits companies out there, like they're all just apps, but people just get one and another and another and another. And the worst thing is they don't even get to know they're in this rat race and they'll never get out.
They'll never get out with that debt.
What do you think about debt? Let's talk about debt.
Well, most people are
The
brought
good
up
side.
right to believe debt's bad. And when I do an event, I'll do a flip chart and I'll put the word debt on the flip chart and I'll put a heart around it because I love it. Now, I will say this, credit card debt's not good debt, but there's good debt and there's bad debt. Mm-hmm. So the good debt we have is if I buy 5,000 apartment buildings, guess who gives me the debt? The bank. But my investors gave me the down payment or the equity. So I raised $150 million of equity. I got $350 million of debt from the banks. And over the last 15 years, I've never missed a mortgage payment. And guess what? That $350 million keeps getting paid down by my tenants. So I love debt. Imagine your debt's being paid off by $10 million a year. Like, I don't own it all, but I own a part of it. Yeah. So I love debt. Debt on my building in Canada was paid off with my profits for my business. So I love debt. But we're taught to believe debt is bad. And if you don't understand it and you sign a contract, you're going to, I don't know if that's true, 3,000%?
3,000?
If you don't understand how that works, debt's going to kill you, right? Yeah. It's impossible. So it's all education.
Especially when since you're a kid, all the context of debt you've been around, it's been negative.
Sure.
Right.
Yep.
That's, yeah, 3,000. It's just crazy. Actually, last thing I saw was the government was actually going after some of these apps because it lets you permission to your photos, and it's criminal stuff.
And that's part of the difference in Canada and Mexico too. Is in Canada there's rules where you can't do that. Like I think 60% is the highest. So and there needs to be, the government needs to step in with situations like that. It's sad. It just makes people poor.
As you said, people has to understand to be in the good side of the debt and understand productive debt, right? And also to be very careful. That's something I told to people with interest rates, because especially if you have a variable interest rate, and if you don't make, let me tell you something. I'm a very Excel guy. I have to see the numbers, the cash flow, even though if it's a projection. Sure. But I just have to see the numbers. People sometimes get scared when you talk to them about making a projection, understanding future cash flows. And again, we're entering in some technicalities. But I say to people, you work tons of hours to earn money.
Right.
And you want to invest so little in to know what to do with it.
Totally
Once
agree.
you got it.
Have you played the cash flow game that Robert Kiyosaki created?
Yeah.
Okay, so when you do a deal card, it says the return right on the cards. And I've done this for almost 20 years doing seminars. I do it now in Mexico. 80% of people that come to my events, wise people, smart people, they don't know how to calculate their return on investment. And it's like, you need to know how to do some basic math, right? Just basic stuff.
Hey, we're not talking here about derivatives
no. Calculus. No, I failed all that stuff. The basic stuff I can do.
Hey, you're an accountant.
I failed calculus twice. I barely got through school.
But we're talking about here multiplications, divisions.
That's it. Simple,
sums,
basic math.
Rest.
All you need.
That's
percentages.
All
you need.
Percentages.
Yeah.
And also a financial sense. No? For example, understanding percentage, understanding return on investment. That's like financial sense.
Compound interest. Rule of 72.
Interest. Yeah.
Those are important rules. Do you know the rule of 72?
Yeah.
I'll put you on the spot.
No. The time you need to double the money, right?
Yeah. So whatever your rate is, this is for everybody. Yeah. If Moris lends me money and he's going to charge me, I'm going to get paid 10%. 72 divided by 10 is 7.2. So it can take you 7.2 years to double your money. Well, if you're saving your money in the bank at 2%, it's going to take you 36 years to double your money.
36.
Right? Or if you can get quince instead of 10, again, just understanding that is really important.
Yeah. And also, I'm a very big fan of the concept cost of opportunity.
Definitely. In
your money, but also, and you said it, return on investment on your time.
Perfect. I agree. Can I tell a story?
What's the return? Yeah. Just asking the people, what's the return of the investment of listening to this conversation?
True.
Of a 300 pesos book.
Yeah, exactly.
Please.
Yeah. Well, my first business, it was selling art, Canadian art. Don't ask me why. I saw an opportunity.
What type of
art? Inuit, like soapstone carvings.
Okay.
From Canada, the people that live far, far north.
Okay.
Not in igloos, but almost. There's a type of art. And I saw somebody that was selling it in Western Canada, but they lived in Eastern Canada.
Okay.
So I just simply said, well, if you live in Quebec, you send your staff here every Christmas, how about I do it? That's how it started. But I didn't know how to sell. So I did okay for 2 years in that first business, but it was the opportunity cost. That's what I learned was, what's my opportunity cost of doing something different? You know, could I really leverage that and become a millionaire? No. So what's the opportunity cost of your time is also very, very important. But I also got good lessons.
Yeah. Difficult to calculate, but important to put it on the
Very
table.
good point.
Let's talk about another concept that I really like. Sunk cost.
Yeah.
Sunk cost and the way people behave, considering this sunk cost, and of course, that enters the cost of opportunity of not making a decision.
Sure.
Or keeping the same track. And you can relate here even as a partner, as a spouse. The cost of opportunity or sink cost to be with the wrong people and the implications financially.
Do we have to talk about this, or is it tequila?
We have to. Completely, Darren. Completely. It's what I say is, if we, you know, these are very basic economic concepts. You agree, right? And you don't have to make calculations to understand the fundamentals of these concepts. But when you take into the real life, it can transform your financial life forever. Not only your financial life, but your personal life.
Sure.
Do you have a story about the sunk cost?
With a spouse or business?
I'm joking. I'm joking.
Me
I'm
too.
joking. No. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about yourself. So you said you were on the beach of Los Cabos. Oh, poor you, poor Darren. And you decided to start a company and to be to come back to the game. Let's say it like
exactly.
that. What drives you?
Financial education. I mean, so my story, even going back to 2001, as I read the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And then
How old were you in 2001?
34.
I'm going to put you on the spot.
34.
34.
So again, I owned, a dozen properties, had a few businesses, but wasn't a millionaire. I mean, I was comfortable and I was doing all right. And then I went online because I thought, okay, this book, I read it in one night. And because I didn't like university so much, well, literally for 10 years, I barely read a book because I turned my mind off after university. I just didn't like learning.
You were already graduate.
10 years earlier.
Yeah, 10 years earlier.
So I found the book, I read it. It's like, wow, this is such an amazing book. I couldn't sleep. I was excited. So I went online and I signed up for a course to become a facilitator to play the cash flow game.
Okay.
That's all I did, but it was a big decision. It was $10,000 US. So I did that, came back to Canada, and my first event had 4 people, lost money, but I kept going, made mistakes. Next event in Calgary had like 8 or 9. Vancouver had 10. Because I put $10,000 into it. It's called the sunk cost.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have the sunk cost right here.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is how it really works. So the first event I do, I lose $1,000. Now my sunk cost is 11. So it took me a while to get back to zero. But I just kept going, and 200 people took the same course as I did, and I was the only one doing it after like a year. That's when Robert phoned me, Robert Kiyosaki, because he didn't know who I was. For a couple of years, but he says, you're the only guy that is doing my mission of education. And I want you to come down. I want to meet you and invite you to special events, blah, blah, blah. And we grew a good partnership over the last, but that's how it started. I just loved financial education. And something that Robert taught me, it's biblical, but the first year I charged money for every single event. After that, every event was free. 99.9% were free.
Okay, again. The first event you charged it.
The first year.
The first year of events you charged.
Yeah, that was business, right? You got to charge people to come in. That's what I thought.
But then it was forever free.
Yeah, I changed my concept because Robert taught me the more you give, the more you receive. Okay. So all my events are free.
Since then.
Even in Mexico. Got an event tomorrow in Monterrey. Now, in Mexico, we have a VIP section if you want, but it's free. So every single Mexican can come in if they want.
Okay.
So now how do you monetize free?
Well,
you have to figure that out.
Yeah, you have to figure it out.
That's what I did in Canada. So when I was on the beach, I was bored. My limiting belief, though, was I didn't know Spanish. So I spoke for a few different people in Mexico over the years. I thought, okay, I need a partner. And I realized really quickly after a few months, okay, this is not the right partner. I said, no, I want to do it myself. I just hired a translator. I'm unfortunately still pretty lazy when it comes to Spanish, but also it proves it's just a limitation if that's what you think you need is to speak the language. So I just wanted to do it again because I love to have people come to an event, see the light bulb go off. They come back and tell you a success story a month later. Like I invested a teeny bit of money or I started a small business on the side. Valerie, right? She works for you, but she also does dresses on the side.
Yeah.
Like, that's a huge success story. Those are, for me, just makes me happy. So I just love the business model. Enjoyable.
What do you think about, it's kind of a strange question, but for example, a lot of people believe that if you give something for free, people doesn't value it. And sometimes you have to charge for it, like for people really to get engaged with. What do you think about it? And I tell you this because I've tested different strategies, for example, with my books. Like, for example, the first thing we tried it was like to give it out for free. People have to learn about finance for free. But then you get mixed. We've sold more than we actually gave out for free. So What do you think about this?
Again, I've tried it all as well. And it depends on your business model.
Yeah.
So for me, back in Canada or even Mexico, you'd always get these experts say, okay, what's your target market? And I said, I don't know. Everybody that has a heartbeat because they have the potential to invest. So in Canada, we had 3 different profit centers, but one of them was the investments, buying the apartment buildings. In Mexico, our primary business decision is investments. But if you come out and you have no money, that's okay. One day you might have money.
Yeah.
Or one day you might introduce somebody to us that has money or whatever, but I'm okay. The cost of the hotel room is relatively the same, whether it's got 50 people in it or 100, So if some are free, that's okay. So that's the way we looked at it. And we've tried free books or not free books. But I also said, I was careful because I always say this, I said they're all free. And then I said, no, they're 99.9% free. Like there's one event we do every year that's got a cost to it.
Okay.
But generally speaking, they're all free. Because I always want to look in the mirror and say, you know what? Even for people that had no money, I didn't say no to them. I always want to be able to say all Mexicans could come to this event for free.
Darren, why financial education?
Since I was 6 years old, I wanted to be rich. Investing in the stock market at 10, buying silver bars when I was 13 or whatever it was, first property, university. I just liked money. And Robert obviously allowed me to get curious. And just the more I studied, the more I listened to him, went to his events and others, the more money I made. So it was just like, wow, this is addictive. It's really fun. But to really answer the question, when somebody comes to an event, nobody forced them to come. So everybody in that room is positive. And I'd love to see them, especially if, let's say, a spouse comes out, a couple, and one spouse dragged out the other.
Yeah.
Whether it's a man or a woman or man, and they're like sitting like this. And then after the first hour, like they don't want to be, you can tell they don't want to be there. And then after the first hour, they're like this. And after the next hour, like, give me more.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a pretty cool feeling. Cool.
And have you seen a difference in, well, of course, in different generations, like of people, the younger ones? One thing I'm impressed is how the Gen Z, the famous Gen Z, like these guys are really into money. Like if you ask him whatever, it's like, okay, how much? Like these guys are very, very financially driven. Not with education necessarily, but they're financially driven, let's say. What is your take on this and the evolution of financial education throughout the different generations?
I don't even know what Gen Z is.
Gen Z?
What age? The young ones?
The TikTok guys.
Yeah, that's why I don't know what it is. I don't know. I don't do much social media, and I just do my thing. Okay. When people come to the events, if they come in, I just do my thing. And it's always a percentage. Out of 100 people, 33% will have no money. 33%, zero money. Yeah. Canadians or Mexicans.
Yeah. Like they just want to learn.
Yeah, they want to go. I'm not saying they have a bad attitude. They just have no money.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean they're not going to be a customer either.
Yeah, of course.
Right? A third of the people say they want to do something but never do. They don't return your phone call. And a third take action. That's kind of the ratio, no matter what age. As you get older, obviously, your kids are out of the house. They don't have to go to university anymore. You've got more money. But it's the same percentage to me. It's just like a third have zero. Doesn't mean they have a bad attitude. A third are, no matter what, they just aren't going to do business with you. A third will do business with you. Whatever generations, I just find it the same. But obviously, my target market is people that have money. And those people are with babies, not with car payments, not with house payments. They're older. It's just normal.
Yeah. What's your take on the future? What's coming for the next 5 years for Darren?
Well, the fund we have, I need to, definitely consider the fintech world as well. So I'm looking into that aggressively.
Like to develop, to take the fund.
Yeah, instead of having a SAPI,
Okay.
It would be a fintech.
Like a fintech, yeah.
More opportunities.
Kind of a crowdfunding?
Kind of, but I don't necessarily believe in the crowdfunding. Here's the thing with fintechs, in my opinion, and I've talked to a number of them. The fintech is the entrepreneur who's a technical wizard. That doesn't mean they're good at projects. There's a huge, huge difference. So a lot of fintechs, they're going to take on projects where they don't really have expertise in an apartment building or in Phone-a-Vide property, and then they lose money. The fintech is great, but the project's bad.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a mix of both. You really have to have a mix of both. And we're looking at different fintechs, but we want to make sure the product is solid. Because once you have one failure, your brand goes down.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm still raising money now in a SAPI, but if you want to leverage, and I don't want to have to go do events everywhere and travel as much, I want to have all of Mexico being reached. And fintech's kind of where we're headed.
Okay.
So that'd be one thing I think we're looking forward to do more. And just, I want to keep enjoying Mexico. I do want to visit culturally and socially, not just to do business everywhere, because I want to see the country more.
Great. So you look forward and making this business, not in Canada, not in the U.S., in Mexico.
Yeah, Canada and U.S., too many regulations, too much bureaucracy.
Really?
And also, when I was in Canada, we did deals in Mexico, Jamaica, Honduras, United States a lot, obviously. But the minute you cross that border, you've got currency concerns and you've got compliance concerns, which are very, very expensive. We would spend $600,000 a year just on audits. $600,000 a year just because you got to cross the border to audit the apartment buildings.
What structure of company did you have?
I don't like the name, but technically it's called a mutual fund trust.
A mutual fund trust.
Yes, Canadian terminology. But then once you did cross-border with the U.S., you had limited partnerships and all kinds. It was complicated. Every deal was different.
And right here you have a SAPI. That's how you manage the fund.
Yeah.
You developed different series of stocks.
Well, we have SAPI that we actually have two opportunities. We have a debt. We talked about debt earlier.
Yeah.
Most of our customers are debt. Very low amount to get a decent rate of return. And the more you put in, the higher the rate of return. I also decided, which I did not do in Canada, I'm selling 20% of my company. Right? So the financial industry is a very lucrative industry, like I mentioned. We're not a bank, but there's significant profits in this industry. So what I decided to do in Mexico is sell up to 20% of my company to my investors. So we have equity or we have the debt. Depends on what people want and their goals.
Oh, so you sell a part of the SAPI to some investors as equity investment.
You know why?
Because why?
Robert Kiyosaki taught me, only lazy people use their own money. Right? So when I come to Mexico, I thought, I could do this with my money. And I did. I funded with my money to begin with. But, why not give this opportunity to others? Because what I figured that would do is have my investors then become my advertisements, my ambassadors. So rather than give money to Mark Zuckerberg, we can share that with our investors with the share prices going up because of marketing costs going down, referrals.
And how do you manage just that? How do you manage the board? Like with so many investors? Well, I don't know how many.
Because they don't own more than 10% right now.
So they don't have a seat.
They'll get one seat in the future.
Okay, yeah, because the first question I was going to ask was, why not as a FOM, for example?
And we're looking into that too.
Yeah.
As we get bigger.
The only thing is that FOM, you get a little bit more of a compliance issue.
Hey, nothing close to what we did in Canada.
Yeah, that's great.
So much compliance.
So, the first reason you said doing business in Mexico is definitely compliance issues. What else?
Sorry, the good or the bad?
Yeah, why to do business in Mexico?
Well, I wanted to do something, and I didn't want to. I just wanted lessons in Canada. I didn't want to cross borders anymore. Currency conversions, tax rates, compliance costs are crazy. And also, here's the biggest advantage I have in Mexico. The biggest advantage I have for my business is the spread. Okay? So the spread for people listening is, for instance, the bank will pay you 4% to save your money. They'll lend it out to you at 20% for a car loan. That's a 16% spread. In Canada, the spread is very condensed. Yeah. My business model would not work in Canada or the United States right now. But in Mexico, because the spread is so high, entrepreneurs are used to paying 20%, 25% minimum to get a loan. So we can pay our investors 10, 12, 15 and get 25. So we have the spread. Yeah. That spread then is shared with my equity investors. So that's the biggest business opportunity I see here is the spread.
The spread.
Great opportunity.
The difference in interest rates and what you pay out. That's great. Darren, something else you want to share with the audience?
Wow.
I mean, we've been in a roller coaster of topics, but...
Yeah, I would say this. If you didn't understand everything, don't worry about it. What Robert Kiyosaki taught me was financial education is like learning a new language. What is debt? What is equity? So fun. SAPIs. All this stuff is all new to some people. So that's fine. If you get a few things out of this, great. Keep studying. Learn the language of finance. And I think that's how you're going to get better rates with lower risk.
And also a message to the people. Every single word we have said here, we have a podcast for it. Explained with very simple terms, very simple language, just as we speak. And also, if you don't understand this podcast, please, come on, English. It's a very good skill in this regionalized modern world. Darren, it's been a pleasure to have you here. I hope you enjoyed the interview. I hope we have many more to come in the future.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you have been listening. This has been another episode of Dimes y Billetes. Hasta la próxima.